Picture this for a second. You're sitting in an executive boardroom at Harvard University. It's arguably one of the most prestigious academic institutions on the planet. Around you are some of the sharpest minds alive: law professors, seasoned diplomats, and master negotiators who have walls covered in gold-framed degrees. These are people who have dedicated their entire lives to studying logic, advanced mathematics, and behavioral economics. They believe the world runs on neat little spreadsheets and rational decisions. And sitting right across the table from them is Chris Voss. Chris isn't an academic. He's a former street cop who worked his way up to become the lead international kidnapping negotiator for the FBI. He doesn't have their fancy degrees, but he has something infinitely more valuable. He has real, raw experience from the gritty, dark streets of New York City and the dense jungles of the Philippines, where he spent years negotiating with ruthless terrorists and desperate hostage takers for human lives. Robert Nukin, a highly respected Harvard law professor, looks at Chris and flashes a sly, confident smile. He leans in and says, "We have your son, Voss. Give us $1 million right now, or he dies." Now, this wasn't a real threat, obviously. It was a simulation. A high-stakes roleplay designed as a test to see who truly controlled the room, academic logic, or primal, street-level instinct. If you were in Chris's shoes, what exactly would you do? Would you rely on traditional logic? Would you try to compromise and say, "Hey, let's split the difference. I'll give you $500,000? That sounds absolutely ridiculous when you say it out loud, doesn't it? You can't exactly split a child in half. Compromise in this situation is a death sentence. But Chris didn't panic. He didn't sweat. He just looked at the brilliant professor with ice-cold calmness and deployed a weapon nobody in that room saw coming. He didn't argue. He didn't make a counteroffer. He didn't even raise his voice. Instead, he asked one simple, open-ended question in a perfectly calm, smooth tone. How am I supposed to do that? That simple question, which sounds almost like a surrender, was actually a lethal psychological trap. The brilliant Harvard professor suddenly stumbled. He hesitated. He started stuttering, trying to explain the logistics, and before he knew what was happening, he was negotiating with himself. He was actively trying to solve Chris's problem instead of threatening him. In that single defining moment, Chris Voss proved a shocking, uncomfortable truth to the academic world. Human beings are not rational creatures. We are deeply emotional animals, and we only use logic to justify the emotional decisions we've already made. This is the absolute core DNA of the book Never Split the Difference. For decades, we've been brainwashed into believing that negotiation is a mathematical formula. If you give me A, I will give you B. That's what they teach us in business school. They tell us to separate the emotion from the problem. But Chris realized through dealing with bank robbers and terrorists that this advice is complete garbage. How on earth can you separate the emotion from the problem when the emotion is the actual problem? How do you logically negotiate with a guy holding a loaded gun to a bank teller's head? The real monster we are fighting here is our own ignorance. We walk into everyday negotiations, whether we are buying a used car, asking our boss for a raise, or even trying to get our stubborn toddler to sleep, thinking we are dealing with logical robots. But our brains are fundamentally divided into two systems, just like the brilliant psychologist Daniel Kahneman explained. System 1 is our animal brain. It's incredibly fast, purely instinctive, and entirely driven by raw emotion. System 2 is our slow, logical, calculating brain. The tragic mistake we make every single day is that we desperately try to talk to System 2, but System 1 is actually holding the steering wheel. We speak to logic, while fear, deep insecurity, and the desperate need for validation are driving the person sitting across from us. Let's dive a little deeper into the psychology of this. Picture yourself walking into a Chase Manhattan bank on a random Tuesday morning. Suddenly, chaos erupts. You realize you are in the middle of a violent, armed robbery. The robbers are wearing masks, waving shotguns, and screaming. Within minutes, the police surround the building. Snipers are positioned on the rooftops. If you were the FBI negotiator standing outside, what would you say to the terrified gunmen inside? Most normal people would grab a megaphone and try to convince him that surrendering is the most logical choice. They'd say, "Listen, we have you surrounded. Just come out with your hands up and you'll get a fair trial." But that robber isn't hearing a word of your logic. His internal voice is screaming, "I'm going to die today. They are going to shoot me." Absolute, paralyzing fear has blinded his rational mind. This is exactly where Chris Voss's first major rule comes into play. It's all about your voice. Your voice is the single most powerful psychological weapon you possess. Chris calls it the late night FM DJ voice. It's a deep, soft, slow, and reassuring tone that naturally inflects downward at the end of a sentence. Why does this work? Because our human brains are hardwired to process intentions through tone long before we comprehend the actual words. When you speak slowly and smoothly, you are literally sending a neurochemical signal straight into the other person's brain. You are bypassing their defenses and telling their nervous system, "I am in control," and "you are completely safe." You are hacking directly into their amygdala, that tiny alarm bell in the brain that controls fear and forcing it to shut down. During a tense standoff in 1993, Chris used this exact voice. He didn't yell demands. He just said smoothly, "You're talking to me now." That profound calmness forced the robber to pause and breathe. But being calm isn't quite enough. You have to make the other person feel like you aren't just hearing them, but stepping inside their world. And that brings us to a ridiculously simple yet magical technique called mirroring. Traditional thinking says you should counter arguments with better arguments, but throwing facts at people just creates massive resistance. Instead, you mirror them. Mirroring simply means repeating the last three words, or the most critical words, the person just said. It works because humans fear what is different and are naturally drawn to what is similar. If your demanding boss walks in and says, "I need you to make 2 copies of every document by noon," you don't argue. You just look up, pause, and with a genuinely curious tone say, "I'm sorry, 2 copies?" He will instantly feel the urge to explain his reasoning, and often, by hearing his own demand reflected back, he will realize how absurd it sounds and change his mind, all because you simply held up a tiny invisible mirror to their thoughts. That is the profound, almost terrifying psychological magic of mirroring. You see, you aren't arguing with them. You aren't aggressively telling them that their idea is stupid or that their timeline is unrealistic. You are just taking the last few words they said and gently tossing them right back into their lap with a tone of genuine, unthreatening curiosity. What happens next is deeply fascinating. You force their subconscious mind to stop, hit the brakes, and actually reflect on their own words, rather than thinking about how to defend against your attack. You are literally making them negotiate with themselves. And in the high-stakes game of human interaction, whether it is in a boardroom or your living room, that is the ultimate form of control. But here's the catch. Mirroring alone is not going to build a solid bridge between two people, especially not when you are facing a real, terrifying monster hiding deep inside the other person. The monster of raw, unfiltered insecurity. To defeat that monster, we have to walk into much more complicated territory. We have to talk about empathy. Now, do not misunderstand me here. When I say empathy, I am not talking about soft, warm, fuzzy feelings. I am not telling you to sit down, hold hands, and cry with your opponent. I am certainly not telling you to agree with their unfair demands just to make them feel comfortable and liked. No. What Chris Voss teaches is something called tactical empathy. Tactical empathy is a cold, highly calculated mental weapon. It is specifically designed to penetrate the deepest, most guarded defenses of the human mind and dismantle them from the inside out. It means you fully understand the turbulent emotions driving the other person. You hear the hidden, unspoken melody behind their angry words. And here is the absolute secret. You translate those chaotic emotions into clear words and say them out loud. We are socially programmed from childhood to believe that ignoring negative emotions will somehow make them magically disappear. When we see someone who is furious, what is our immediate reaction? We tell them, hey, calm down. There's no reason to be mad. And what happens every single time? They explode. They get twice as angry. Because by telling them to calm down, you are denying the reality of their feelings. You are signaling to their nervous system that you do not understand them, which instantly categorizes you as a threat, as an enemy. Instead of denying the emotion, you have to use a psychological technique called labeling. When you notice that your boss is incredibly anxious about delivering a project to a major client, do not offer empty logical reassurance. Do not say, "Don't worry, we will get it done on time." That is logical garbage that completely ignores the emotional brain. Instead, look at him and say, "It seems like you are really terrified about how the client will react if we miss this deadline." Did you catch the magic words there? It seems like. You are not accusing him. You are not passing judgment. You are just gently tossing an observation into the air. The moment you put a name to a fear, the moment you drag it out of the dark corners of the mind and into the light, you literally switch off the amygdala. You drain the venom right out of the emotional wound. You see, neuroscientists have actually mapped this out in brain scans. When a person is experiencing intense fear or anger, the amygdala lights up like a Christmas tree. But the exact second someone else recognizes that emotion and assigns a verbal label to it, the electrical activity instantly shifts away from the amygdala and moves into the prefrontal cortex, the rational, logical part of the brain. You are literally rewiring their brain chemistry in real time just by changing how you speak to them. If you want to take this to an even higher, more masterful level, you perform an accusation audit. This is where you intentionally list every terrible, negative thing the other person could possibly think about you before they even have a chance to say it. Imagine you are walking into your boss's office to ask for a massive raise during a tough financial quarter. Their System 1 brain is already highly defensive. So you start by saying, "You are going to think I am completely greedy. You are going to think I am ungrateful for the job I have. And you will probably think I am completely blind to the financial struggles this company is facing right now." By saying their worst fears out loud, you steal all their ammunition. You leave them with absolutely nothing to attack you with. In fact, human nature will usually force them to step in and defend you, saying, "Well, I wouldn't say you are greedy. You have completely neutralized the tension in the room." And this leads us directly to one of the most terrifying yet beautiful concepts in the entire world of negotiation. A simple word that we have been running away from since we were little kids. The word no. Think about it. Your entire life, you have been relentlessly trained to be a yes hunter. Salesmen, lawyers, politicians, and even us in our romantic relationships, we are always desperately fishing for a positive answer. We falsely believe that hearing yes is the ultimate finish line. But Chris Voss learned the hard way in life or death hostage situations that yes is very often the biggest, most dangerous lie in human communication. There are actually three entirely different types of yes. There is the commitment yes, which is a true binding agreement, but it is incredibly rare. There is the confirmation yes, which is just an innocent answer to a black and white question. But then there is the third type, the most common and the most toxic of all, the counterfeit yes. People will say yes to you simply to make you shut up. They say it so you will leave them alone. It is a protective shield they use to escape a conversation that is causing them emotional discomfort. When you corner someone with close-ended questions, trying to force them down a logical path to agree with you, you are suffocating them. You are stealing their autonomy. And human nature rebels violently when it feels a loss of control. Think about that annoying telemarketer who calls you during dinner. They ask, "Do you want to save money on your electric bill?" It is a trap. If you say yes, you are stuck in their script forever. If you say no, you sound like an idiot, so you give a counterfeit yes. "Yeah, sure, send me an email," just to get them off the phone. So, what is the strategic solution? The solution is that you must actively seek out the word no. Yes, you heard me correctly. You must invite them to reject you. The word no is not the tragic end of a negotiation. It is the actual beginning. When a human being says no, they instantly feel a massive wave of relief. They feel safe. They feel like they have established a firm boundary. They are protecting themselves. And most importantly, they feel like they are the one in control of the conversation. The very second you grant them that powerful illusion of control, their defensive walls drop to the floor. They relax and they finally become open to listening to your side. Think about the psychology of a hostage situation. The hostage taker is surrounded by SWAT teams, helicopters, and snipers. He has absolutely zero control over his environment. He is a trapped animal. If you, as the negotiator, start barking orders at him, you are confirming his total loss of control, which makes him desperate and deadly. But if you ask him a question that invites a no, like, do you want this to end in a massive shootout today? He gets to confidently say no. And in that tiny moment, he feels like he is the one making the decisions. Let me give you a classic everyday corporate example. Imagine you are trying to reach a stubborn client or a coworker who is completely ignoring your emails. You have sent 3 polite messages and got nothing but silence. The traditional weak approach is to send a 4th email saying, "Have you had a chance to review my previous messages?" Or "Just checking in, hope you are doing well." That is terrible. It generates deep feelings of guilt and annoying pressure, practically guaranteeing they will ignore you again. Try Chris Voss's brilliant magic instead. Send a completely blank email with a 1-sentence subject line, "Have you given up on this project?" Boom. That single sentence strikes a very deep, primal psychological nerve. Nobody on earth wants to be labeled as a quitter. Nobody wants to be seen as someone who just gives up and walks away. Their natural, unavoidable instinct will drive them to reply almost instantly to defend their identity. They will say, "No, I haven't given up. I have just been incredibly overwhelmed with other things." You just aggressively fished for a no, and by getting it, you also got their honest justification. Most importantly, you brought them right back to the negotiation table without ever begging for their attention. You weaponized their deep psychological need to defend their own identity. Once you completely eliminate your fear of the word no, you stop chasing the fake yes, and you start looking for the real holy grail of negotiation, the golden phrase. Most people falsely believe that hearing the other person say, "You're right," is a massive, crushing victory. Listen to me closely. If someone looks at you and says, "You are right," you have completely failed. Yes, you lost. "You're right" is the exact phrase we use when we want to get rid of someone who is annoying us with their unsolicited advice. Imagine you are arguing with your spouse. They are firing logical arguments at you, one after another, trying to prove their point. You are exhausted. So finally, you throw your hands up in the air and you say, "Fine. You're right." Did they actually change your mind? Absolutely not. You just wanted to stop the relentless flow of words coming out of their mouth. So you threw "you are right" at them like a cheap bone to a stray dog just to make them go away. Chris Voss calls this phrase the absolute worst thing you can possibly hear in any negotiation. It means the other person has completely disconnected from you. They are not buying into your vision. They are just surviving the conversation until they can finally escape. So if "you are right" is a terrible failure, what is the golden phrase? What is the psychological holy grail we are desperately hunting for? It is 2 incredibly simple words. That's right. Notice the subtle difference here. Not "you are right," but "that's right." When someone says "you are right," they are judging you. But when they say "that's right," they are judging the situation itself. They are experiencing a profound moment of total realization. They are looking at the exact same picture you just painted for them, and their brain is instantly releasing a massive dose of oxytocin, the human bonding hormone. Let me tell you a real-world story about how powerful this is. Chris was once called in to negotiate a terrifying kidnapping in the dense jungles of the Philippines. A brutal terrorist group had captured an innocent American. They were demanding a massive ransom, highly motivated by a deeply ingrained worldview. The standard FBI playbook would be to argue logically, but Chris knew that Daniel Kahneman's System 1, their fast, emotional, identity-driven animal brain, was entirely in the driver's seat. So, Chris did not argue. He used relentless tactical empathy. He spent grueling hours just summarizing the terrorists' worldview back to them. He laid out all their deep grievances and their profound sense of injustice. He didn't agree with them. He just reflected their reality with chilling accuracy. Finally, the hardened terrorist leader on the other end of the phone went completely silent. And then he breathed heavily and said, "That's right." Shortly after that breakthrough, the ransom demands vanished. They eventually released the hostage safely. Not because they were beaten with pure logic, but because they finally felt deeply understood. The human brain is desperately hungry to be understood. But what happens when you are dealing with someone who is actively trying to manipulate you? What happens when they drop the ultimate psychological bomb on the table? I am talking about the dreaded F word of negotiation. I am talking about the word fair. We just want what is fair. Have you ever heard that line in a car dealership or during a messy divorce? The word fair is a ruthless emotional weapon. It is perfectly designed to instantly trigger your amygdala. It hacks directly into your deepest insecurities, making you feel immensely guilty and instantly defensive. When someone says, "I am just giving you a fair offer," your brain panics. You immediately think, wait, am I being unfair? The word fair triggers the terrifying fear of losing your reputation. So, how do you disarm this toxic weapon? You simply pause, look them dead in the eye, and say, "Fair?" It seems like you are ready to provide the evidence that supports that. Or better yet, you aggressively set the stage of fairness from the very beginning. You casually say, "I want you to feel like you are being treated fairly, so please stop me at any time if you feel I am being unfair." Boom. You just stole their heaviest weapon and put it in your pocket. This leads directly to the ultimate phase of the battle, bending their reality. True negotiation is not about violently forcing your will on someone. It is about quietly planting a seed in their mind and letting them believe they grew the tree themselves. And the best fertilizer for that seed is the calibrated question. Most of us ask terrible questions. We constantly ask, why? The word why is deeply accusatory. In any culture, why instantly puts people on the defensive. It makes them feel like a little child being scolded. A master negotiator completely removes why from their vocabulary. Instead, you replace it with how or what. Back in that Harvard boardroom, when Chris Voss was told to hand over $1 million, he didn't scream, "Why are you doing this?" He just smoothly asked, "How am I supposed to do that?" That simple how question is a piece of absolute genius. First, it actively asks them for their expert help. It subtly shifts the heavy burden of solving the problem onto their shoulders. Second, it gives them the ultimate illusion of control. They feel incredibly powerful explaining the process. But in reality, you are quietly steering the ship. You have completely boxed them in. If your landlord wants to raise your rent by 20%, don't scream or threaten to move out. Use your calming late-night DJ voice, look slightly pained, and softly ask, "How am I supposed to pay that when my salary hasn't changed at all?" Now, the landlord has to logically negotiate with his own aggressive demand. This entire journey, the calming voices, the subtle mirrors, the emotional labels, the brilliant how questions, prepares you for the ultimate secret, black swans. A black swan is a hidden piece of critical information. It is the secret motivation the other side is desperately trying to hide. If you find it, it flips the game upside down. Maybe the guy selling the car is secretly going through a messy divorce and absolutely needs cash tomorrow morning. People hide black swans because they feel incredibly vulnerable. But when you master tactical empathy, when you flawlessly mirror their words, accurately label their fears, and give them the sweet illusion of control, they will eventually let their heavy guard down. They will accidentally reveal that one hidden piece of the puzzle. And when they do, you use it to carefully build a beautiful solution that feels like a massive win for them while magically giving you exactly what you want. We are not just negotiating for money or cars or promotions. We are negotiating every single day of our lives for respect, for deep understanding, and for our own identity in this noisy world. Next time you walk into a tense room, do not foolishly bring pure logic to an emotional gunfight. Bring your profound empathy, bring your calming voice, and simply watch the massive walls crumble. If you want to keep mastering the hidden psychology of the world around you and uncover more dark secrets that will give you an unfair advantage in life, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now, because you definitely won't want to miss what we decode next.